Good morning, class and student. This is your faculty and coach for the subject Business Environment, Vivek Burda. I'm again with you to take up the next topic in our syllabus, not in our content. So we are moving to the next topic and the important topic for our business environment. And today we are going to understand about the role of the internationalization, or basically called as a globalization. So over here, we'll be understanding about the impact of the globalization, in which we'll be understanding about the globalization of the world economy, the globalization of the business, the features of the current globalization, the stages of the globalization, the essential conditions of the globalization, the foreign market entry strategies, the pros and cons of the globalization, the policy options, the globalization of the Indian businesses, and so on. So over here, first we need to understand that the IMF defines globalization as a growing economic interdependence of the countries worldwide through increasing volume and the variety of the cross-border transactions in the goods and services and of the international capital flows, and through more rapid and widespread diffusion of the technology. As the mission Scholasticity puts in, the globalization for the better or worse has been changed the way the world does businesses. Through still it is in the early stages, it is all but unstoppable. The challenge is that the individuals that the businesses face is learning how to live with it, manage it, and take advantage of the benefits it offers. In the management challenge for the 21st century, the Peter Drucker cautious, all institutions have to make the global competitiveness a strategic goal. Non-institutional, whether a business or a university or a hospital, which can hope to survive and let alone to succeed, unless it measures up to the standards set up by the leaders in the field any place in the world. We may consider globalization at two levels. First, that is at a macro level, that is the globalization of the world economy, or at a macro level, that is the globalization of the business of the firms. Thus, the globalization of the world economy is achieved quite obviously by globalizing the national economies. Thus, the globalization of the economy and the globalization of the businesses are very much interdependent. Globalization of the world economy has been emerging as a global or the transitional economy. A global or the transitional economy is one which transcends the national borders unerringed by the artificial restrictions like global, by the government restrictions on the trade and the surplus movements. Thus, the globalization is a process of development of the world into a single integrated economic unit. The transitional economy is different from the international economy. The international economy is characterized by the existence of the different national economies. The economic relation between them being regulated by the national government. The transitional economy is borderless, and the world economy characterized by the free flow of the trade and the factors of the production across the national borders. Thus, the Duckner, in his new realities, observed that the early or the mid 70s, with the OPEC and the President Nixon floating of the dollar, the world economy changed from being international to the transactional. According to Duckner, the transactional economy is characterized by the inter alia with the following features. First is the transactional economy is shaped mainly by the money flow rather than by the trade in the goods and the services. The money flow have been their own dynamics. The monetary and the fiscal policies of the foreign governments increasingly react to the events in the international money and capital markets rather than the actively shaping them. Second, in the transactional economy, the management has emerged as a decisive factor to the production and the traditional factors of the production and the land and the labor, which have increasingly become secondary. The money and the capital markets do have increasingly becoming the transactional and the universally obtainable. Thus, the Duckner before argues that in the it is the management of which the competitive positions which has to be based. In the transactional economy, the goal is market maximization and it is not the profit maximization. Thus, the trade which increasingly follows the investment is becoming a function of the investments. Thus, the decision making power is shifting from the nation state to the region, that is, the regional blocks like the European Community, North American Free Trade Agreements, etc. There is a genuine and almost the autonomous world economy of the money, credit, and the investment flows. It is organized by the information which is no longer knows national boundaries. Finally, there is a growing pervasiveness of the transnational corporations which see the entire world as a single market of the production and the marketing of the goods and the services. Thus, there are many factors which tend to promote the transnationalization of the world economy. and the multilateral trade negotiations under the auspices of the GATT WTO has become liberalizing trade and investments. Thus, the growing proportion of the world output is traded internationally and with the faster growth of the trade than the GDP and is bringing down the world economic integrations. This economic integration is reinforced by the massive cross-border capital flows and the progress of the regional blocs increasingly integrate the regional economies. Next are the drivers of the globalization. The term globalization represents the increasing integration of the world economy based on the five integrated drivers of the change, in which the first driver is the international trade, that is the lower trade barriers and the lower competition. Second is the financial flows, which represents the foreign direct investment, technology transfer, licensing, portfolios, investments, and the debt. Third is the communications, in which the traditional media and the internet. Fourth is the technological advances in the transportation, which represents the electronic, bioengineering, and the related fields. Fifth is the population mobility, in which are spatially of the neighbors, and each of these drivers of the change has accelerated in the recent years, and each reinforces the others. Thus, the globalization of the business, meaning and the dimensions. The globalization is, in its true sense, is the way of the corporate life necessitated, facilitated, and nourished by the transnationalization of the world economy and developed by the corporate strategies. Globalization is the attitude of mind. It is a mindset which views the entire world as a single market, so that the corporate strategy is based on the dynamics of the global business environment. International marketing or the international investment does not account for the globalization unless it is result of such global orientation. Globalization encompasses the following. First, it is doing or planning to expand the business globally. Second, giving up the distinction between the domestic market and the foreign market and developing a global outlook of the business. Third is locating the production and the other physical facilities or consideration of the global business dynamics irrespective of the national considerations. Next is basing the product development and the production planning or the global market considerations. Further, it is includes the global sourcing of the factors of the production, that is the raw materials, components, machineries, technology, finance, etc., which are obtained for the best source anywhere in the world. Lastly, is the global orientation of the organizational structure and managing the culture. Thus, the companies which are opted for the global outlook stop thinking of themselves as a national market, who venture abroad and start thinking of themselves as a global marketer. Thus, the top management and the staff are involved in planning of the worldwide manufacturing facilities, marketing the policies, financial flows, and the logistical systems. Thus, the global operating units reportedly report directly to the chief executives and the executive committees, not to the head of the international divisions. Executives are trained in the worldwide operations, not just the domestic or the international. Management is recruited from many countries. Components and supplies are purchased where they can be obtained at the least cost, and the investments are made where the anticipated returns are greatest. Thus, a truly global corporation views the entire world as a single market. That is, it does not differentiate between the domestic market and the foreign market. In other words, it is nothing like a home market and the foreign market, but there is only one market, that is the global market. As Kenchi Ome observes that it is well in its well-known book that the borderless world, the global corporation develops a genuine distance of the perspective that it is the managers that is truly global orientation consciously try to set up plans and build organizations as if they view all key customers distance from the corporate sectors. For example, the managers of Fuda, which has operations in the southern part of the world, do not think or act as if the company were divided between the Japanese and the overseas operations. Indeed, the every word overseas has no place in Huda's vocabulary because of the corporation which sees itself as an equidistant from all its key customers. At KSU, the top managers gather information directly from each other of their primary market and then sit down together once a month to lay out revised plans for the global market development. Thus, the multinational develop integrated international production, logistics, and the marketing system. The production sharing between the various units from different countries. For example, about two-thirds of the Toyota's total business is outside Japan. More than half of the vehicles sold overseas and manufactured overseas, and the remaining exports from Japan. Toyota has established the integrated manufacturing system in all three of its main markets, thus the North America, Europe, and Asia. The plants in the China, Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, Taiwan, Thailand turned out nearly one-third of the complete overseas production. These manufacturing units are interlinked by the flow of the components, parts, production units, planning, etc. to cite a different example. Thus, the Mazda sports car MX-5 Miata and other are designed in California, which had its prototype created in England. and are assembled in Michigan and Mexico using advanced electronic components invented in New Jersey and fabricated in Japan, financed from Tokyo and New York, and marketed globally. Thus, the global sourcing, as discussed earlier, throws the light about how the different aspects of the global integration. The main features of the current globalization. The globalization, of course, is not a new phenomenon. The period of 1870 to 1913 experienced a growing trend towards globalization. The new phase of globalization, which started towards mid 20th century, became very widespread, more pronounced and overcharging since the late 1980s by gathering some momentum from the political and the economic changes that swept across the communist countries and the economic reforms in which other countries, thus the latest multilateral agreements which seek to the substantially liberalize international trade and the investments and the technological and the communication revolutions. Thus, there are several similarities and differences between the two phases of the globalization. First is the Human Development Report based in year 1999, which mentions following new features of the current phase of globalization. The first is the new market, the growing global market in the services, which includes the banking, insurance, and transport. Second is the new financial market, which includes deregulated, globally linked, working around the clock with the action of distance in the real time and new instruments such as derivatives. Third is the deregulation of the antitrust laws and the profiteering of the mergers and the acquisitions. Fourth is the global consumer markets with the global brands. With respect to the new actors, the multinational corporations integrating with the production and the marketing, dominating the food and production, thus the WTO, that is the World Trade Organization, the first multilateral organization with authority to enforce national government compliances with the rules, and international criminal court systems in its making. Thus, the booming international network of the NGOs and the regional bloc profit proliferating and gaining the importance. The European Union Association of the Southeast Asian Nations, because North American Free Trade Association, Southern African Development Communities, etc., and so on. And more importantly, are the policy coordination groups, which include G7, G40, G22, G77, and the OCR, etc. With respect to the globalization, the new rules and the norms, the market economic policy spread around the world with great privatization and liberalization than in the earlier decades. With the widespread adoption of the democracy as the choice of the political regime, with the human rights conventions and the instruments building up its both coverage and the number of signatories and growing awareness among people around the world. Next is the conscious goals and the action agenda for the development. Next is the conventions and the agreements of the global environment, the biodiversity, ozone layer, disposal of the hazardous waste, desertification, climate change, etc. It further includes the multilateral agreements in the trade, taking on such new agendas at the environmental and the social conditions. Further includes the new multilateral agreements for the services, which includes intellectual property, communications, more binding of the national governments than any previous agreements. Further, the multilateral agreements on the investments under the debate. Thus, the new tools for the communication are the internet and the electronic communication, linking many people simultaneously, cellular phones, the fax machines, faster and the cheap transport of the air, rail, road, and the computer-aided designs. The stages of the globalization. Normally, a firm passes through different stages of the development before it becomes a truly global corporation. Typically, a domestic firm starts its international business by exporting. Later, it may establish a joint venture or subsidiaries abroad. From an international firm, it may then develop into the multinational firm and finally into the global one. The OME identifies 5 different stages in the development of the firm into the global corporation. The first stage is the arm length service activity of the essentially domestic company, which moves into the new market, overseeing by linking up the local dealers and distributors. In the stage 2, the company takes over these activities on its own. In the next stage, the domestic based companies begin to carry out its own manufacturing, marketing, and sales in the key foreign market. In the stage 4, the company moves to the fully insider position in this market and supported by the complete business system, which includes R&D and engineering. This stage calls on the managers to replicate in the new environment and the hardware and systems and operational rituals and have worked so well at the home. It forces them to extend and reach to the domestic headquarters, which now has to provide support functions such as personnel and the finances and all other overseas activities. Although the stage 4, the headquarters actually continues to dominate, the different local operations are linked with their relation to each other, established by their relation to the center. In the fifth stage, the company moves towards the genuinely global mode of operation, and in this context, the OMA points out to the company's ability to serve the local customers in its market around the globe in a way that is truly responsive to their other needs, as well as the global character of the industry depends on its ability to strike a new organizational balance. What it is called is called the Okyomotro of the Sony, which has termed global localization, a new orientation that simultaneously looks in both the directions. Let's get into the stage 5. However, means venturing onto the new ground altogether, the OME argues that it may make his organizational transition. The company must denationalize their operations and create a system of values shared by the corporate managers around the globe to replace the blue and nation-based orientation once provided. OME further observed that the today's global corporations are nationality-less because consumers have become less nationalistic. Truly global corporations serves the interest of the customers, not the governments. They do not exploit local situations and then repatriate all other profits back home, leaving each local area poorer for their having been there. They invest, they train, they pay taxes, they build infrastructure, and they provide the good value to the customers in all the countries where they do the business. Thus, the IBM Japan, for instance, has provided the employment to about 2,000 Japanese for over the past decade and has provided 3 times more tax revenue to the Japanese government than the Japanese company Fujitsu. And many firms across the world has ambitious plan to become the global. There are, however, some essential conditions which needs to be satisfied on the part of the domestic economy as well as the firm for this successful globalization of the business. And they are, as a business freedom, there should not be an unnecessary government restrictions which come in the way of the globalization, like the import restrictions, restrictions on sourcing the finances or other factors from abroad and the foreign investment, etc. That is why the economic liberalization is regarded as the first step towards the facilitating the globalization. Second is the facilities. The extent to which the entrepreneurs can develop globally from the home country base depends upon the facilities available, like the infrastructure facilities and so on. Third is the government support. Although the necessary government interference is the hindrance to the globalization, and the government support can encourage globalization. Thus, the government support may take the form of the policy, the procedural reforms, the development of the common facilities like infrastructure facilities, R&D support, financial market reforms, and so on. Next is the resources. The resources is one of the most important factors which often decides the ability of the firm to globalize. Thus, the resourcing companies may find it easier to trust ahead in the global market. The resources include the finance, technology, R&D capabilities, managerial expertise, the company, and the brand image, human resource, etc. And it should, however, be noted that many small firms may have been very successful in the international business because of one or the other advantages they possess. Competitiveness. The competitive advantage of the company is that a very important determinant to success in the global business. A firm may derive the competitive advantage from any one or more of the factors such as low cost in the price, the product quality, the product differentiation, the technological superiority, after sales services, marketing strength, etc. And sometimes the small firms may have an edge over others in certain aspect or time of the business. Orientation, a global orientation on the part of the business firms and suitable globalization strategies are essential for the globalization. Now, what are the strategies which are referred for the entering the foreign market? So, the foreign market entry strategies, it is one of the most important strategic decisions in the international business and is the mode of entering the foreign market. One of the extreme a company may do to do the complete manufacturing of the product domestically and export it to the foreign market. On the other extreme, a company may do by itself complete manufacturing of the product to be marketed in the foreign market there itself. There are several alternatives in between these two extremes. The choice of the most suitable alternative is based on the relevant factors which are related to the company and the foreign market. In some cases, the alternatives available may be limited. For example, the policy of some governments, which may not be positive towards the foreign investments. Several governments have defined preferences for the government ventures over the complete foreign ownership. In some cases, the government may prefer foreign investments, leading to the important substitutions of the perpetual import of the product. Thus, in some cases, the government policies may rule out to the best alternatives if the environment were free. Thus, the important foreign entry market strategies are as follows. First is exporting. Thus, the licensing, franchising, contract manufacturing, management, contract, assembly, operations, fully owned manufacturing facilities, joint venture, counter trade, mergers, acquisition, strategic lines in the third country location. Exporting. Exporting, the most traditional mode of entering the foreign market, is quite common one even now. International trades have become growing much faster than the world output, resulting in greater world economic integration. Exporting is the appropriate strategy where one or more of the following conditions prevail. First is the volume of the foreign business is not large enough to justify the production in the foreign market. Second, the cost of the production in the foreign market is high. Third, the foreign market is characterized by the production bottlenecks like infrastructure problems, problems with the material supplies, etc. Fourth, there are political or the other risks of investment in the foreign countries. Fifth, the company has no permanent interest in the foreign market concerned, or that there will be no guarantee in the market available for after long. Sixth, the foreign investment is not favored by the foreign country concerned. Seventh, the licensing or the contract manufacturing is not a better alternative. Whereas exporting is more attractive than other modes, particularly when underutilized capacity exists. Even when there is no excess capacity, the expansion of the existing facility may sometimes be easier and less costly than setting up new production facilities abroad. Further, many governments, as in the India, provide incentives for establishing the facilities for the export production. Thus, the alternatives to making in the foreign countries by the international marketers for marketing the goods in the foreign countries are licensing and contract manufacturing. Although these have certain advantages, there have also been certain risks, and hence, if the company does not want to go in for licensing the contract manufacturing, the only avenue open is exporting. Although exporting may turn out to be the best alternative under the certain set of conditions or the environmental factors, there are several set of conditions which make exporting less attractive, and then one or more of the other alternatives, policies, or some foreign government discriminate against imports. In some cases, the import is even banned. It may be noted that the hostility against imports have been encouraging substitution of the exports by production in the foreign market. Thus, a number of the foreign companies have set up production facilities in the European community to overcome the importing barriers. And the Japanese transplants in the North America have been accused to the considerable extent by the hostility towards imports. Besides, in the number of cases, cost consideration make foreign production or assembly preferable to other country strategies. Further, exporting marks its first stage in the evolution of the international business to many companies. As an international business grows, or as the environment changes, or to the expand the business, it may become necessary to change the strategies. Thus, licensing and franchising. Licensing and franchising, which involves minimal commitment of the resources and efforts of the part of the international marketer, are easy way of entering the foreign market. Under international licensing, the firm is one country, that is the licensing permits a firm in another country, that is the licensee, to use the intellectual property such as patents, trademarks, copyrights, technology, technical know-how, and the marketing skills, or some other specific skills. Thus, the monetary benefit of the to the licensor is the royalty or the fees which licensee pays. In many countries, such fees or the royalties are regulated by the government. It does not exceed 5% of the sales in many developing countries. A licensing agreement may also be one of the cross licensing, wherein there is a mutual exchange of the knowledge and of the patents. In cross licensing, a cash payment or may not be involved. Franchising is a form of licensing in which the parent company, that is the franchisor, grants another independent entity, that is the franchisee, the right to do the business in a prescribed manner. And this right can be in the form of selling the franchisor's product, using in its name, production, and marketing the techniques or the general business approaches. One of the common forms of franchising involves franchising supplying the important ingredients, part, material, etc. for the finished products, like Coca-Cola supplying the syrups or the bottlers. Using franchising involves combination of many of the elements which are mentioned above. Thus, the major forms of franchising are manufacturer retailing systems such as automobile dealership, manufacturer wholesaler systems such as soft drink companies, and service firms retailer systems such as lodging, servicing, and fast food outlets. Thus, the international licensing franchising have grown very substantially. Sikonita and the Rokanins successively describe the attractiveness or the regions of the narrative. As an entry strategy, it requires either the capital investment nor the knowledge and the marketing strength in the foreign markets. By earning royalty income, it provides an opportunity to exploit research and development already committed to licensing, reduce risk, to exposure to the government intervention is that the licensing is typically a local company that can provide leverage against the government actions. But licensing will help to avoid the host country regulations that are more prevalent in the equity ventures. Licensing will also serve as a stage in the internationalization of the firm by providing the means by which the foreign market can be tested without major involvement in the capital. Another advantage of the licensing is that it may be employed as a preemptive strategy against the competitors by combining the foreign market before the competitors could enter, and thus the General Electric of the USA by licensing is advanced gas turbine technology to the foreign producers who were potential competitors and could eliminate the possible competition from them. Thus, licensing can be been used by many companies also to harvest their obsolete products. This strategy has been employed in particular in the developing countries. When the market is closed by the host country regulations either to the importers or to the foreign investment, the licensing may provide a viable opportunity to enter such market. From the point of view to the licensing provides a great advantage of entering the market with a proven product technology or the marketing intangible without having a run of risk of the R&D failures. It also reduces the investment requirements. One of the major risks of licensing is that the licensor would be developing a potential competitor. A licensee would become a competitor thereafter the expiry of the licensing agreement. Thus, the licensee may develop capabilities to introduce better products and the skills of the Japanese in product improvement and is a well-known licensee in the developing countries, which might gain an edge over the licensor after the term of the licensee because of their low cost of the labor, which could enable them to compete with the erstwhile licensor in its own market as well as in the foreign market. And some companies are therefore hesitant to enter into the licensing agreements. Next is the contract manufacturing. Under the contract manufacturing, the company doing the international marketing contracts with the firm in the foreign countries to manufacture or assemble the product while retaining the responsibility of the marketing product. It is a common practice of the international business. The contract manufacturing has following advantage. First, the company does not have to commit the resources of setting up the production facilities. It frees the company from risk of investing in the foreign countries. If ideal production capacity is readily available in the foreign country, it enables the marketers to get started immediately. In many cases, the cost of the product obtained from contract manufacturing is lower then it was manufactured by the international firm. For example, the product cost in the small scale sector is much lower than that of the large scale sector for many products because of the lower wages, lower overheads, and the tax concessions. Moreover, if the excess capacities are available with the existing units, it may even be possible to get the product supplied on the marginal cost. Fifth, the contract manufacturing also has the advantage that it is a less risky way to start with if the businesses does not get picked up sufficiently dropping it in easy. But if the company had established its own production facilities, then the exist would be difficult. Moreover, contract manufacturing may enable the international firm to enlist the national support. Contract manufacturing, however, has a following disadvantage. In some cases, there is a loss of potential profits from manufacturing. Second is the less control over the manufacturing processes. Third is the contract manufacturing also has risk of developing potential competitors. Fourth, it would not be suitable in case of the high-tech products and the cases which involve the technical secrets, etc. Next is the management contracting. Thus, under the management contract, the firm providing the management know-how may not have the equity stake in the enterprise and being managed in short, in the management contract, the suppliers bring together a package of the skills that will provide integrated services to the client without incurring the risk of benefiting to the to the ownership. Thus, the coder observes that management contracting is a low risk method of getting into the foreign market, and it starts yielding income right from the beginning. Thus, the arrangement is especially attractive if the contracting firm is given an option to purchase some shares of the managed company with this stated period. The management contract could sometimes bring the additional benefits of managing the company. It may obtain the business for exporting or selling otherwise the product of the managed company or supplying the inputs required by the managed company. Second, the management contract enables the firm to commercialize existing know-how that they can build up significant investment, and frequently the impact of the fluctuations in the business volume can be reduced by making use of the experienced personnel who otherwise would have been to be laid off. Thus, the management contracts obviously have clear benefits for the clients. They can provide organizational skills not available locally, expertise that is immediately available rather than built up and management assistance in the form of support services that would be difficult and costly to replicate locally. Thus, the management contracts have disadvantages also under certain conditions. As Coulter observes, the management is not sensible if the company has put up its care management talent to better use, or if there are the greater profits to be made up by undertaking the whole venture. Thus, the management contract may prevent a company from setting up its own operation from the particular period. One possible risk from the point of view of the client is over dependence and the loss of control. Some Indian companies like Tata Tea, Harrison, Malayalam, and AVT have contracts to manage the number of plantations in Sri Lanka. Tata Tea has also joint venture in Sri Lanka, namely State Management Services Private Limited. Thus, the turnkey contracts. The turnkey contracts are common in international businesses in the supply, erection, and commissioning of the plants, as in the case of oil refineries, steel mills, cement, and the fertilizer plants, etc., construction projects, and franchising agreements. A turnkey operation is the agreement by the seller to supply a buyer with the facility fully equipped with the which is ready to be operated by the buyer's personnel who will be trained by the seller. The term is sometimes used in fast food franchising when the franchisor agrees to select a store site, build the store, equip it, train the franchisee, and employees sometimes arrange for financing. Thus, many turnkey contracts involves government, public sector as the buyer or the seller in some cases. A turnkey contractor may subcontract different phases which are the parts of the project. And thus the wholly owned manufacturing facilities. A company with the long-term substantial interest in the foreign market normally established a fully owned manufacturing facilities. As Japan points out, it is simply not possible to maintain a substantial market which stands in an important area unless one has a physical presence as a producer. Next is the establishment of the manufacturing facilities abroad, which has several advantages. It provides the firm with the complete control over the production and the quality. It does not have the risk of developing the potential competitors, as the case of the licensing and the contract manufacturing. The wholly owned manufacturing facilities have several disadvantages too. In some cases, the cost of the production is high and the foreign market. There may also be problems such as restrictions regarding the type of the technology, non-availability of the skilled labor, production bottlenecks due to the infrastructure problems, etc. If the market size is small, a separate production unit for the market may be uneconomical. Foreign investment may also entail the political risk. Fully owned enterprises may not be allowed or favored in some countries, particularly in the low priority areas. Moreover, this method demands sufficient financial and management resources on the part of the company. Assembly operations. As Miracle and the MM point out, the manufacturers who want many of the advantages that are associated with the overseas manufacturing facilities and yet does not want to go that far may find it desirable to establish the overseas assembly facilities in the selected markets. In a sense, the establishment of an assembly operation represents the cross between exporting and overseas manufacturing. Having assembly facilities in the foreign market is a very ideal, and where there are economies of the scale in the manufacture to part of the components, and when the assembly operations are labor intensive and labor is cheap in the foreign country, it may be noted that the number of US manufacturers ship the part of the components of the developing countries, get the product assembled there and bring it back home. Thus, the US tariff law also encourage this. Thus, even product meant to be marketed domestically are assembled abroad. Assembling the product meant for the foreign market is the foreign market itself has certain other advantages besides the cost advantage. Thus, the import duty is normally low on the parts, and is low on the parts and components other than of the finished product. Assembly operations would satisfy the local content demand with at least some extent. Because of this employee generation, the foreign government attitude will be more favorable than towards the import of the finished product. Other advantage is that the investment is to be made in the foreign country is very small in comparison with the required for the established complete manufacturing facilities. Thus, the political risk of the foreign investment is thus not much. Joint ventures. The joint venture is a very common strategy of entering the foreign market. In the widest sense, any form of the association which implies collaboration for more than transitionary period is a joint venture. Pure traditionally operations are not included in the concept. Such broad definition encompasses many diverse types of joint ventures, operations, etc. Sharing ownership and management in an enterprise. Thus, the licensing, franchising agreements, contract manufacturing, management contracts. There are three of the above have already been discussed in the preceding sections. Thus, the following paragraph has confined the first strategy which are referred to the above, that is the joint ownership ventures. What is often meant by the term joint venture is the joint ownership venture. The essential feature of the joint ownership venture is that the ownership and the management are shared between a foreign firm and a local firm. In some cases, there are more than two parties involved. A joint ownership venture may be brought by the foreign investors buying an interest in the local company, a local firm acquiring an interest in the existing firm, or by both the foreign and the local entrepreneurs jointly forming a new enterprise. It is a common practice to split the local interest between the partner and the various public participation, public sector firms, or the industrial development and the organization. Such a strategy may enable the international firms to retain much control despite the minority holding, as a power of remaining shares is spread out. Further, equity holding by the public would help the enterprise to get some public support. The partnership with the government organizations may help to obtain the favorable treatment from the government. In countries where fully owned firms are not allowed or favored, the joint venture is the alternative if the international market is interested in establishing an enterprise in the foreign market. Many foreign companies entered the communist, socialist, and other developing countries by joint venturing. One of the important advantages of the joint venturing is that it permits the firm with the limited resources to enter the more foreign market that might be possible under the policy of the forming wholly owned subsidiaries. In some cases, it is also possible to swap know-how such as patent rights for the equity in forming the joint venture as means of securing the ownership. In foreign operations, there's the partnership with the local firms has certain specific advantages. A local partner will be a better position to deal with the government and the public. Further, there would not be much public hostility when there is a local partner. It would be much less when there is an equity holding by the government sector and the public. A right local partner for the government joint venture have been a major impact of the firm's competitiveness, because such partners can serve as a cultural bridge between the manufacturer and the market. For example, several successful foreign affiliated companies have demonstrated how the right partnership can strongly enhance the strong firm's competitive edge and its ability to adapt to and cope with the idiosyncrasies of the Japanese market. Thus, the joint venture can succeed only if both the partners have something definite to offer to the advantage of the firms and other definite advantages, and have a mutual trust with respect. Third country location. The third country location is sometimes used as an entry strategy where they have no commercial transactions between the two nations because of the political reasons, or when the direct transitions between the two nations are difficult due to the political reasons or like. A firm is one of these nations which want to enter the other market while they have to operate from the other third country base. For example, the Taiwanese entrepreneurs found it easy to enter the People's Republic of China through the base in the Hong Kong. The third country location may also be helpful to take the advantage of the friendly trade relations between the third country and the foreign market concerned. Thus, for example, the Ranks Xerox found it convenient to enter the erstwhile USSR through its Indian joint venture Modi Xerox. Next is about the mergers and acquisitions. The mergers and the acquisitions have been a very important market entry strategy as well as the expansion strategy. The number of the Indian companies have also used this entry strategy. The mergers and acquisitions have a clear specific advantage. It provides instant access to the market and the distribution network as one of the most difficult areas in the international marketing and the distribution. It is often a very important consideration for the mergers and acquisitions. Another important objective of merger and acquisition is to obtain the access to how the new technology or the patent rights. Mergers and acquisition also have advantage of reducing its competition. Mergers and acquisitions may also have given rise to some problems which arise mostly because of the deficiencies of evaluation of the case of the acquisition. Sometimes the cost of the acquisition may be unrealistically high. Further, when an enterprise is taken over, all its problems and also acquired with it, the success of the enterprises will naturally depend on the success in solving the problems. This is about the strategic alliance. Strategic alliance has been becoming more and more popular in the international business, also known by such names as to N8 and the coalition. This strategy seeks to enhance the long-term competitive advantages of the firm by forming the alliance with its competitors and existing or the potential in critical areas instead of competing with each other. Thus, the goals are to leverage the critical capabilities, increasing the flow of innovation, and increase the flexibility in responding to the market and the technological changes. Thus, the strategic alliance is also sometimes used as a market entry strategy. For example, a firm which enters the foreign market by forming an alliance with the firm in the foreign market for marketing or distribution of the former's product. Thus, the US pharmaceutical firm may use the sales promotion and the distribution infrastructure of the Japanese pharmaceutical firms to sell its product in Japan. In return, the Japanese firm can use the same strategy for the sale of its product in the US market. Thus, the strategic alliance is more than an entry strategy, is a competitive strategy. There are different types of alliances according to the purpose of the structure and based on the description of the generic form of the coalition. The Michael Porter and the Mark Fuller Maxey classifies following according to the purpose of the as follows. First is the technology development alliance. Like the research consortia, the simultaneous engineering agreements, licensing or the joint development agreements. Second is the marketing, sales and the service alliance in which the company makes use of the marketing infrastructure etc. to the another company in the foreign market for its product. This may help easy penetration of the foreign market and the preemption of the potential competitors. Third is a market activity alliance, which involves the combine of two or more type of alliances, while the marketing alliances are often single country alliances as international firms take on the different allies in each country. The technology development and the operational alliances are usually multi-country since such kind of activities can be employed over several countries. There is the multiple activity alliances, which involves combining of two or more type of alliances, while marketing alliances are often single country alliances as international firms takes on the different allies in each country. The technology development and the operational alliances are usually multi-country since these kinds of alliances can be employed over several countries. Thus, the strategic alliances also differ accordingly to how they are structured. They can be equity-based joint ventures or non-equity-based. Non-equity-based alliances such as technology transfers agreements, licensing agreements, marketing agreements, etc., are providing to be more dynamic, more constructive, and more strategic, according to Maxey. As indicated above, several areas of businesses, the above R&D to distribution provides scope of alliance, whether it is R&D, manufacturing, or marketing. An important objective of the collaboration and is to maximize the marginal contribution to the fixed cost. Next is about the counter trade. Remember, although it is a major reason for the substantial growth of the counter trade and is to use the strategy to increase the exports, particularly to the developing countries, the counter trade has been successfully used by the number of companies as the entry strategy. For example, PepsiCo gained an entry to the USSR by employing this strategy. Thus, the counter trade is a form of international trade in which the certain exports and the import transactions are directly linked with each other and in which the import of the goods are paid by export of the goods instead of the money payments. In the modern economics, most transaction involves monetary payments and the receipts which are immediate and deferred. As against this, the counter trade refers to the variety of the unconventional international trade practices which link each of the goods services directly or indirectly in an attempt to displace the currency transactions. Thus, the form of the counter trade. The counter trade takes several forms. The following are the most common among of them. Barter. The barter refers to the direct exchange of the goods or equal value, which is with no mean and no third party involved in it. For example, a counter trade deals between the Minerals and the Metal Trading Corporation of India (MMTC) and the Yugoslavian company involved import of 50,000 tons of the rails of the values of about $38 million by the MMTC and the purchase of the Yugoslavian company of the iron ore concentrates and the pellets of the same value. Next is about the buyback. Under the buyback agreement, the supplier of the plant, equipment, or the technology agrees to purchase the goods manufactured with that equipment or the technology. Under the buyback scheme, the full payment may be made in kind or the part that may made in the kind and the balances in cash. Thus, a $20 crore buyback agreement with the Soviet Union provided for the import of the 200 sophisticated looms by the National Textile Corporation, and the buyback ratio was 75%. Next is about the compensation deal. See, under this agreement, the seller receives the part of the counter purchase. Under the counter purchase agreement, the seller receives the full payment in the cash but agrees to spend the equivalent amount of money in that country within the specified period. And the classic example of this kind of agreement was Pepsi Cola trade with the USSR. Pepsi Cola has got paid in the rubles for the sale of the concentrates in the USSR but spent this amount for purchase of the Russian products like vodka and wine. The counter trade has been growing with government patronage. It is noted that the South Commission was advocated counter trade as a useful mechanism for overcoming difficulties of the payments, export, credit, foreign exchange, which might otherwise be serious obstacles to the expansion of the trade between the developing countries. As the Commission points out, so far the bulk of the counter trade between the developing countries, which have been conducted mostly through the intermediaries of the industrial countries. If the developed countries would have been benefited most from this type of trade, it would have been obviously which have no interest in helping the indirect trading partners in NCDs to establish the direct contract and develop the durable trading relationships. Therefore, the developing countries need to organize themselves to counter trade, and this can also pave the way of growth of more conventional trading relations. Thus, the reason of the growth of the counter trade. There have been several reasons for the counter trade to become popular. Obviously, the countries or the companies concentrate which have encouraged or involved in the counter trade due to certain specific advantage, although some of the benefits may be purely temporary. First is the counter trade was very common between the communist countries. It has also become popular in respect of the trade between the communist bloc and many developing countries, because of which the many developing countries were eagerly looking towards the bloc of increasing the exports, among other things, and this naturally led to the acceptance of the trade practices preferred by their centrally planned economies. Thus, the counter trade became popular in the East-West trade mainly due to the foreign exchange problems faced by the East Bloc. The Pepsi Cola is just one example of the multinational corporation which made considerable international businesses with the USSR by the counter trade. With the foreign exchange problems which become more severe for the developing countries following is the oil prices hikes, which begin to actively pursue the counter trade in the frantic bid to increase their exports by all means. Thus, the many companies in the advanced countries have resorted to the counter trade for the various reasons like selling obsolete products, increasing the sale of the capital goods, increasing the agritable businesses, etc. Counter trade has also been resorted to by the several companies to mitigate the effects of the recessions. Such recessionary situation in the capital goods industries in the advanced countries have gave the developing countries an opportunity to push their exports by trying to import the capital goods with the exports by counter trade. The results of the above survey also suggested that the counter trade enables firms to penetrate difficult market, to increase the sales volume, and to achieve the fuller capacity utilization. It has also been revealed that the counter trade enables the firms to dispose of the declining products, which are particularly important given the very rapid pace of technological advances. Some countries which have made counter trade a means to increase the sale through distinguished undercutting of the cartel prices. For example, the oil price fixed by the OPEC. Having realized the potential of increasing the businesses by engaging the counter trade, many international trading corporations becomes active in the counter trade, and their trading with many countries enable them to even take up such complex transactions as the case of the Daimler ban cited earlier. Drawbacks. Although the counter trade has several jurisdictions, particularly in the short run, it suffers from the number of disadvantages and the problems, particularly in the long run. Firstly, the counter trade encourages the bilateralism as the expense of the bilateralism. Secondly, it adversely affects the export market development. Thirdly, although the several developing countries regard counter trade as an easy route of export, they often stand to lose in terms of the price. For instance, the Poland bought Libyan oil at a discount and sold it at a higher price on the Rotterdam spot market. Fourthly, it adversely affects the competition and many more things. Thus, the pros and cons of the globalization. While globalization has several benefits, it has number of problems also. While the developing countries, which is in past were against the globalization, have widely opened their doors for the globalization, and many people in the developed countries like USA are angry against the globalization. The American jobs and the wages levels are severely affected by the influx of the cheap imports and shifting of the production to the low-cost overseas locations. According to the Business Week and the Harris poll in early 2000, more than two-thirds of the Americans believe that the globalization drags down US wages. A strong majority of the Americans feel that the trade policies have not been adequately addressed with the concern of the American workers, international labor standards, or the environment. And the important pros and cons of the globalization, according to the above survey, are as follows: the productivity grows more quickly when the countries produce goods and services, which they have comparative advantage. Living standards can go up faster. Thus, the global competition and the imports keep the lid on the prices, so the inflation is likely to derail the economic growth, and open economy spurs innovation with fresh ideas from abroad. The export jobs often pay more than other jobs. The unfettered capital inflows give the US access to the foreign investment and keep the interest rates low. But the adverse effects of the globalization, according to the survey, are first that the millions of the Americans have lost their jobs due to the import of the production shift abroad. Most of them find new jobs which are at a less pay. Millions of others fear losing their jobs, especially to those companies operating under the competitive pressure. The workers face pay cut demands from the employers, which often threatens to export the jobs. Services and the white collar jobs are increasingly vulnerable to the operations moving offshore. And the US employees can lose their comparative advantage when companies build advanced factories in the low wage countries, making them as productive as those at the home. Now, the true globalization can benefit the developing countries in several ways. It is, however, apparent that the unregulated globalization will cause serious problems for the developing countries. Thus, the most universal acceptance of the market economy and the globalization driven by the private enterprises tend to abrogate most of the harmful effects traditionally attributed by the neocolonialism. The global dominance of the industries by the MNCs is on the increase. Many countries are indiscriminate in liberalizing the foreign investments. The Pepsi, Coke, and the junk foods are allowed even in countries like China. Number of countries allowing high foreign stake in even in the industries where that is not really required. This could affect the domestic enterprises of the developing countries, and there have been a large number of cases to take over the national firms by the foreign firms. In some of these cases, the domestic firms are driven to a situation of having to hand over the majority or complete equity of the foreign partners to joint ventures because of inability of the Indian partners to bring the additional capital or some other incapability. Thus, the replacement of the traditional and the indigenous products by the modern products, resulting in ruin of the traditional craft and the industries and in the livelihood of the people in these sectors, have also been happening in the several countries. One common criticism has been the technology of the MNCs briefing in and may not be one suited in the host countries, but this suits the objectives of the MNCs. While this could be the more true in the liberalized environment of today, not another problem in such as dumping of the outmoded technology of the developing countries is not as valid today as in the past, and in future it is likely to be even less valid. Further, in the competitive environment, the firm can survive only if it is efficient. Companies all around the world, including many large multinationals, have been cutting down the size of their human resources as one of the means of achieving cost efficiency. Thus, the problem of overmanning is very severe in developing countries. Unless these firms get rid of the surplus labor, they can hardly be competitive or successful. That means that the liberalization can succeed only if the economy grows very fast to absorb the displaced labor and the new addition of the labor force. Thus, the developing countries in general have been disadvantaged by the international trading system. This adverse terms led to the economic loss of the developing countries in general, and the least developed countries have become most deprived. In it may, however, be noted that one of the reasons for the adversity terms of the trade of the developing countries is the demand supply factors. It is also estimated that the least developed countries tend to lose up $600 million a year, and the sub-Saharan African as a result of the Uruguay Round Agreement, while the developed countries are expected to gain a very substantially multilateral trade liberalization. Liberalization and were mostly in respect to the goods traded between the industrial economies and those exported from developing to the trade economies, which has not benefited as much as while developing the countries as a group now face the tariffs 10% higher than that of a global average. And the least developed countries face the tariffs 30% much higher because of the tariffs remain high on the goods and the greatest potential for the poorest countries such as potential leather and the agriculture commodities. It should, however, be noted that the number of the developing countries have improved their export performance substantially, and several of them are under the top 20 exporters. Despite being a different problem and the discrimination, there is a chance of developing countries benefiting from the trade. The basic trade theory argues that the people gain from the trade liberalization. Developing countries have a comparative advantage in abundant, low cost, and unskilled labor, and if they concentrate on the goods whose production is simple and the labor intensive, greater integration into the global market should increase their export and the output, raising the demand of the unskilled labor and raising their income to the poor relatives to those of the non poor. Moreover, countries move up the trade ladder, exporting more sophisticated products, leaving the space of the ladder below for the later industrialization countries, and all this helps reduce poverty. Thus, the countries of the higher rungs benefits most, but even those on the lower rungs should be seen poverty fall. And the free trade should also help the poor consumers without trade protection, low prices, and should fall with the world prices. There should also be price benefits of the employment from the liberal financial regimes, removing the restrictions on the capital flow, and should attract more FDIs, creating more jobs for the poor by integrating them into the international system of production. It is criticized that the developed nations receive most of the FDIs. A very small number of the developing countries, which has a relative developed or large or fast growing in the developing world, account for the lion's share of the FDI flows of this country. And what are the critics does not appreciate is that the foreign investment flows are based on the economic rationale. It is unrealistic to expect the pattern of the flow of different to be different. Another criticism is that the liberalization increases the economic inequality. Even in China, the liberalization has created many islands of the affluence. If equality increases because of worsening of the life conditions of the poor, it certainly is injustifiable. But if the increase in the inequality is the result of improving the economic conditions of a section, while there is no economic deterioration of any section, or because of this proportionate benefit, the question is whether the economic progress or some sections should be curbed so that there will not be widening of the inequality. Thus, the liberalization may increase inequality further. Several sectors, and sections may not directly or immediately benefit from mere liberalization. There may also be shock and other adverse effects on the weaker sections. It is therefore necessary that there should be real social economic reforms rather than the liberalization. Targeted poverty and eradication programs and social safety net are very important. But the fast growth and the overall development resulting from the liberalization could have a major impact on the poverty. The Navis points out that there are estimated 200 to 270 million Chinese people living in absolute poverty in 1978 and the year in which the liberalization began. And their number came down to 100 million by 1985. Thus, the foreign capital has significantly boosted the investment and the economic growth in China. The China has leaped forwarded on the export front too, and the foreign funded enterprises contribute a substantial chunk of the export from China. Although the countries which carry out proper reforms in real earnest should not also be expected to reap such gains in varying degrees, but half-hearted and the confused measures and implementational problems may create more problems which they can solve. Although the MNCs have a virtue by their size and resources have certain advantages, they may also have limitations or disadvantages in certain spheres or the aspects of the businesses. The small and the medium often have some edge over their very large one in respect to the standardized products or technologies like greater flexibility and adaptability, lower overheads, intimacy with the customers, etc. Lower cost is a great advantage which the firms from the developing countries enjoy, and it may be noted that the major component of the growth of several Indian pharmaceutical firms is the foreign market. They are relying mostly on the bulk drugs and generics. What is often ignored while discussing is the impact of the product patent and its patented drug accounts only for about 15% of the Indian drug market. There are several more products which could go off patent in the coming years, and the production of which can also be taken up by the Indian firms. Thus, the new patent regime should be expected, which help the Indian industry by promoting it to give added trust to the R&D and thereby enabling the Indian firms which also to develop the patented products. Positive signs are already there on to the horizon. There are also many evidences of the better technology brought in by the MNCs, including of the provoking Indian firms to absorb the similar technology, leading to their enhanced competitiveness and the market expansion. Next is about the policy options. With the view of minimizing the damage and maximizing the opportunities of the globalization, with the macroeconomic point of view, the Human Development Report 1997 of the UNDP has made the following policy suggestions. It managed the trade and practices and capital flow more carefully, invest in the poor people, foster small enterprises, properly manage new technology, reduce the poverty and introduce the safety nets, influence the governance. Thus, the report also points out that the seeds of the opportunity of the globalization in the poorest developing countries states the following. First, a more supportive macroeconomic policy environment for the poverty eradication. The world clearly needs much more effective macroeconomic policy management at the global level. While more stable sources of the international liquidity, better surveillance, faster crisis response management, and the large multinational lender for the last resort, existing organization serves this purpose inadequately. A fair institutional environment for the global trade, there is an urgent need to treat the products of the developing countries on the par with those with the industrial countries and to accelerate the liberalization of the market of the interest to the poor countries such as textile and the institute and the comprehensive ban of dumping the agriculture exports. Third is about the partnership with the multinational corporations to promote the growth of the poverty reduction and incentive scheme that is while avoiding the excessive regulations encourages the multinational corporations to contribute to the poverty reduction and to be publicly accountable and socially responsible. Both the industrial and the developing countries have interest here. Those of the industrial including preventing the tax evasion. Action to stop the race of the bottom. In the world of cutthroat competition, the countries underbid each other in the labor cost, labor standards, and the environmental protection. To produce as cheaply as possible as the traditional market, many countries unilaterally try to restrain these race to the bottom, and some of them may come under the external pressure. Where they tolerate dangerous working conditions and the child labor with the human rights issues as a basis of unilateral trade sanctions. A more efficient and equitable approach would be to strengthen the institutions such as international labor organizations to support respect for the labor rights and to develop a similar institutions for the international environment protection. Thus, the international coordination is also needed to avoid the races to attract the international investors by offering overly generous tax incentives that eroded the tax base. Next is about the selective support of the global technology priorities, actions of the global debt. The highly indebted poor countries need debt relief now, not at some indeterminate point in future. Providing effective relief to the 20 worst affected countries could cost between $5.5 billion to $7.7 billion, less than the cost of one steel bomber and roughly equivalent to the cost of building the Euro Disney theme park in France. Next is the globalization on the Indian business. Thus, the Indian economic integration with the rest of the world has been very limited because of the restrictive economic policies followed until 1991. That the Indian firms confined themselves by and large to the home market. Foreign investment by the Indian firms are very insignificant. With the new economic policies assured in 1991, there has been large, however, been a change of the globalization and has in fact become a buzzword with the Indian firms now. And many are expanding their overseas businesses by different strategies. In this section, we will look at the hurdles to and the prospects of the globalization of the Indian businesses and the different globalization strategies. First is the obstacle to for the globalization. The firm business suffers from a number of disadvantages in respect to the globalization of the business. The important problems of the business, the government policies and the procedures. The government policies and the procedures in the India are among the most complex, confusing, and cumbersome in the world. Even when the much publicized globalization, they do not present a very conducive situation. One prerequisite for success of the globalization is swift and efficient action. With the government policies and the bureaucratic culture in the India in this respect are not that encouraging. Second is the high cost. The high cost of many vital inputs and the other factors like the raw material and the intermediates and the power finances, infrastructure facilities like ports, etc., tend to reduce the international competitiveness of the Indian firms. Third is the poor infrastructure. The infrastructure in India is generally inadequate and inefficient, and therefore it is very costly. It is a very serious problem affecting the growth as well as the competitiveness. Next is about the obsolescence. The technology employed, mode, and the style of the operation, etc., are in general obsolete, and these seriously affect the competitiveness. Next is about the resistance to the change. There are several socio-political factors which resist the change, and this comes in the way of modernization, rationalization, and efficiency improvements. Thus, the technology modernization is resisted due to the fear of employment. Thus, the extent of the excessive labor employed by the Indian industry is alarming. Because of this, the labor productivity is very low, and this is some cases some that offset the advantages of the cheap labor. Next is about the poor quality image. Due to the various reasons, the quality of many Indian products is poor. Even when the quality is poor, the poor quality image of India has become a handicap. Next is about the supply problems due to the various reasons like the low production capacity, shortages of the raw materials, and the infrastructure like the power and the port facilities. The Indian companies, in many instances, are not able to accept large orders or to keep up the delivery schedules. Small sizes, because of the small size and the low level of the resources, in many cases, the Indian firms are not able to compete with the giants of the other countries. Even the largest of the Indian companies are the small compared to the multinational giants. Lack of the experience, the general lack of the experience in managing the international businesses is another important problem. Limited R&D, marketing, research, the marketing, research, and the R&D in other areas are vital inputs for the development of the international businesses. However, there are poor in the Indian businesses. Next is about the business expenditure, the growing competition. The competition is growing not only from the firms in developed countries but also for the developing countries. Indeed, the growing competition from the developing countries firm is a serious challenge for the India's international business. Next is about the trade barriers. Although the tariff barriers of the trade have progressively reduced thanks to the GATT and WTO, the non-tariff barriers which have increasingly, particularly in the Indian countries, further the trading blocks like the NAFTA, EC, etc., could be adversely affect the Indian businesses. Next is about the factors which affect favoring globalization. Although the India is several handicapped and have also a number of favorable factors for globalization of the Indian businesses. Thus, the human resource, apart from the local cost of the labor, there are several other aspects of the human resource to the Indian favor. Thus, India is one of the important pool of the scientific and the technical manpower. The number of the management graduates is also surging. It is widely recognized that given the right environment, the Indian scientists and the technical persons can do excellently. Similarly, is although the labor productivity in India, which is generally low, given the right environment, it will be good. While several countries are facing several shortages and may face diminishing labor supply, India presents the opposite picture. Cheap labor has particular attraction for the several industries. Now is the wide base. India has a very broad resource in the industrial base which can support a variety of businesses. Growing domestic market. The growing domestic market enables the Indian companies to consolidate their position and to gain more strength and to make a foray of their foreign market or to expand their foreign businesses. Niche market. There are many marketing opportunities abroad present in the form of niche market. A niche is a small segment of the market ignored or not properly served by the large players. Such niche are particularly attractive as small companies. Several Indian companies have become very successful by the niche marketing. Expanding markets, the growing population has disposable income and result in expanding the international market provides enormous business opportunities. Transnationalization of the world economy, transnationalization of the world economy, that is the integration of the national economies into the single world economy is envisaged by growing the interdependence on the globalization of the market and the external factors encouraging the globalization of the India business. Next is about the NRIs, the large number of the non-resident Indians who are resourceful in terms of the capital, skills, experience, exposures, ideas, etc. is an asset which can contribute to the globalization of the Indian business. Thus, the contribution to the overseas Chinese to the recent impressive industrialization development of the China may be noted here. Economic liberalization. The economic liberalization in India is an encouraging factor of globalization. Thus, the declining of the industries, removal of the restrictions on the growth, opening up the industries, several earlier reserved for the public sectors, import liberalization of the policies towards the foreign capital and the technology, etc., and can encourage the globalization of the Indian business. Further liberalization in other countries, which increase the foreign business opportunities for the Indian businesses. Next is about the competition. The growing competition, both from within the country and abroad, provokes many Indian companies to look to the foreign market seriously to improve their competitive positions and to increase the business. Sometimes companies enter the foreign market as a counter competitive strategy, that is to fight the foreign companies in its home market to weaken their competitive strength. Thus, over here, we can conclude that the intention of the globalization is efficiently improvement and the market optimism, taking the advantage of the opportunities for the global environment. Therefore, in many cases, the Indian companies have to globalize to survive or grow in the emerging competitive environment. Thus, the limitation of the national market diversity and the unevenness of the resource endowments of the different national complexity of the technological development, differences in the levels of the development and the demand patterns, differences in the production efficiencies and the cost, technological evolution in the communication and the other fields, etc., mandate the globalization. Thus, the restrictive economic policies of the past severely affected the competitiveness and the growth of the industry, Indian industry in general. The new economic policy suffers from certain defects, which is a welcome change. If the Indian firms have a facility to obtain the latest technology in the world, to raise the finance from the cheapest source and procure the materials from the best source in the world, they are on the equal footing with the foreign firms in many respects. As if the Indian firms can muster some edge over the foreign firms in respect to the labor cost, the productivity, product quality, features, etc., could be a competitive advantage. Lastly, in many cases, size is a very important factor which influences the competitive power, that is the economic liberalization by burning down the list of the industries reserved for the public sector. Delicensing and amending of the MRTP Act has provided an environment which enables the companies to grow fast, both internationally and internally and externally. The growth plans of many Indian companies indicate a leap towards push forward towards the increase in the size and keep the companies on the short footing to make further dent and both the domestic and the foreign market. In short, the Indian industries is where they can take the jump towards the past situation for limping forward. Thus, the several Indian companies are already leading players. The Ispat group of Mittals, which has units in countries like US, Canada, Indonesia, Trinidad and Tobago, is the largest sponge of iron producer in the world. The Aditya Birla Group is the world largest player in the viscose fiber and the carbon black, and also the largest refiner of the palm oil. The SL Packaging, which is already the world's second largest integrated producer of the laminated tube, is aiming to climb up the number of on poisons. Arvind Mill is one of the world's largest producer of the denim cloth and is making further thrust where it is ongoing projects are fully implemented. Reliance Industry, which would have been the second largest texture in the world, is fully integrated from naphtha to fabrics. India is also the major player in two-wheeler and bicycle. India is the largest producer of several agricultural commodities. Thus, the liberalization in India and other countries posed a real challenge to the Indian business to prove its mettle, and they are doing it remarkably well. In the end, we can summarize this globalization as globalization may be defined as a growing economic interdependence of the countries worldwide through increasing volume and variety of the cross-border transactions in goods and services and the international capital flows, and also through more rapid and widespread diffusion of the technology. Globalization is advancing and is unstoppable, so that the challenge is how to live with it and take advantage of the opportunities. Globalization may be considered to as a two level, that is a macro level, that is the globalization of the world economy, and at a macro level, that is the globalization of the business and the firms. Thus, the globalization of the world economy is achieved through quite obviously by the globalizing the national economies. Thus, the globalization of the economies and the globalization of the businesses are very much interdependent. Globalization is not a new phenomenon. The period 1970 to 1913 experienced a growing trend towards the globalization. This new phase of the globalization, which started between the mid 20th century, became very widespread and more pronounced and overcharging since the late 1980s by gathering more momentum from the political and economical changes that swept across the communist countries, the economic reforms in other countries, and the latest multilateral trade agreements which seeks to substantially liberalize international trade and investment and the technological and the communication revolutions. There are several similarities between and differences between the two phases of the globalization. The first current phase of the globalization is characterized by the several new features like the new market, new technologies, new actors, and new rules and the norms. At a corporate level, the globalization is a true sense in a way of corporate life necessitated, facilitated, and nourished by the transnationalization of the world economy and developed by the corporate strategy. Thus, the globalization is the attitude of the mind and is a mindset which view the entire world as a single market so that the corporate strategy is based on the dynamics of the global business environment. International marketing or the international investment does not amount for the globalization unless it is result of such a global orientation. Normally, a firm passes through different stages of the development before it becomes a truly global corporation. Typically, a domestic firm starts its international business by exporting. Later, it may establish a joint venture or subsidiaries abroad. From an international firm, it may then develop into the national firm and then finally into a global one. Thus, there are some essential conditions to be satisfied on the part of the domestic economy as well as the firm for successful globalization of the business, and which may include the following business freedom which are required in facilitating the government supports and the resources competitiveness and the proper strategic orientation. There are a number of foreign market entry strategies for going global. The choice of most suitable alternatives is based on the relevant factors which are related to the companies and the environment of the domestic and the foreign markets. Thus, the important market entry strategies are depicted as in the figure 41.1. The globalization has both beneficial and the harmful effects. It affects differentially different countries and the sector industries and the sections of the people. It is interestingly to note that while developing countries, which is the past, were against globalization, have widely opened their doors of the globalization. Many people in the developed countries like USA are angry against the globalization because of the deindustrialization, the job cuts, etc., and the associated problems. Although the globalization may benefit the developing countries in several ways, unregulated globalization may cause serious problems for the developing countries, and the almost universal acceptance of the market economy and the globalization drivers by the private enterprises tend to abrogate its absence of the proper regulations with almost of the harmful effects traditionally attributed by the nepotism. Several measures of the national and international levels are required to mitigate the harmful effects which lead to the benefit of the globalization. Through this image, you can see the foreign market entry strategies in which there are four strategies. First is by exporting, second is by licensing or franchising, in which we make the strategic license. Third is by the production assembly or the facility in the foreign market. It is done using the help of contract manufacturing assembly operations, wholly owned manufacturing facility, or using the joint venture concept. And last is through the mergers and acquisitions. Thus, the Indian economic integration with the rest of the world has been very limited because of the restrictive economic policies followed until 1991. The Indian economy confined themselves as by the large at the home. Foreign investments by the Indian firms are very insignificant. With the new economic policies ushered in 1991, there has now, however, been a change. The globalization has in fact become a buzzword with the Indian firms now, and many are expanding their overseas businesses by different strategies. Thus, the Indian business, however, suffer from a number of the disadvantages in respect to the globalization of the business. Not only that the government policies lack a positive orientation in some respect, but also the government policies and the procedures in India are among the most complex, confusing, and cumbersome in the world. Another problem is that the high cost inadequacy of many vital inputs and other factors like the raw materials and the intermediates, power, financing, infrastructure facilities like the port, etc., tend to reduce the international competitiveness of the Indian businesses, and they are also problems related to the technology, small size, and lack of the experience of the firms, poor quality, lack of the R&D efforts, etc. Although the individuals have several handicaps, and there are also a number of favorable factors for globalization of the Indian business. These include the human resource, global entrepreneurship, growing domestic market, growing foreign market, opening up more and more niche market, large number of non-resident Indians, who are resourceful, etc. If the Indian firms have the facility to obtain the latest technology in the world, to raise the finances from the cheapest source and procure the materials from the best source in the world, can muster some edge over the foreign firms in respect to the labor cost, productivity, product quality, feature, etc., that could be a competitive advantage. So this is all about the globalization. And there are few references, for example, by the Charles Mission, International Business Culture, California, is a very good book. Apart from that, about Peter Drucker, Philip Porter, Marketing Management, Nang Kishi Obe, The Broadest World, and also there are is few other books by the other people which can be studied over there. So this is all about over here. So students, we can now conclude the topic globalization. I hope you are able to understand large over it. And if I summarize the things in the topic globalization, we have seen the globalization of the world economy. We have seen the globalization of the business. We have even understood the meaning and dimensions of the globalization. We have seen the features of the current globalization. We have understood about the globalization stages, the essential conditions of the globalization, the foreign market entry strategies, the pros and cons of the globalization, the policy options, the globalization of the Indian businesses, and then lastly, we have concluded and summarized the today's session. So I hope I'm able to summarize out the things very clearly to each one of you. Anywhere, anyone having any doubt can come back and reach to us on the official ID that is called vivekji.management@tmu.ac.in. Thank you. This is your faculty, mentor, and host for the subject business environment. See you again in the next class with best wishes for your studies and academic growth. Thank you.